Today on the Locked On Blues podcast, is the Jakub Vrana trade potentially one of the greatest trades Doug Armstrong has ever made? Who should be the next captain of the St. Louis Blues? And can Colton Parayko be the number one defenseman on a contending team? It is another edition of Blue or False, where I ask you guys questions and then I react to them. Should be a fun episode. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you guys are too. Make sure you stay tuned.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source for Blues content. I'm your host, as always, Josh Hyman. If you don't know me, welcome to the show. I've been covering the St. Louis Blues for about 5 or so years, whether it be tweeting, writing articles, or doing this podcast, which I've done for about 3 or so years. If this isn't your first time tuning in, thanks for coming back. Thanks for making me part of your daily routine, making Locked On Blues your hashtag first listen, and bearing with me, getting back up to speed, posting more episodes more frequently. So appreciate you guys being patient with that. But been really enjoying it these last few weeks, and today's segment is a big part of that. It is blue or false. If this is your first time watching one of these, I ask you guys 3 poll questions on Twitter and YouTube. You guys vote, I react to them, etc. If you want to tune into the show, make sure you're subscribed and followed on all podcast platforms as well as YouTube. That way, if you're subscribed on YouTube, not only can you see my wonderful face, you can also participate in these polls in the future. If you're not following on Twitter, or you can vote twice and contribute to both. But yeah, like I said, 3 different poll questions, agree or disagree. Usually there's one that's a little bit different this week. Call it blue or false, true or false. Haha, funny. But let's just jump into the first one. You heard the questions at the top of the episode, and you might be like, whoa, those are some hot takes. Like, yeah, that's the point. I want to ask some questions that are going to be pretty divisive sometimes. In the past, we've had some questions that are around 50-50, and then some that are like 95% to 5%. So that's sort of the reaction that I'm going for. I want to gauge the fan base, want to gauge the listeners, and not always an endorsement. If I make a poll, I don't always endorse it. I don't always agree or disagree. Maybe I'm on the fence. So let's just jump into the first one. And I was very, very, very surprised with the results of this one. Starting with YouTube, I posted agree or disagree. The Jakub Vrana trade could end up as the best trade Doug Armstrong has ever made. I know. Bold claim. Doug Armstrong has been the GM of the Blues for a good while now. He's got a lot of trades under his belt. Obviously, most recently, he traded Jakub Vrana, or he acquired Jakub Vrana for a 7th round pick and I don't even remember who the player was, but a player that will most likely never see NHL time. So basically acquired Jakub Vrana for free. Since then, he has been an absolute monster. I think he's got like 9 goals in 13 games, a couple game winners in there. He's pretty much single-handedly stopping the Blues from tanking. And he's young. He's only 26. Blues, have the potential of having him as a main part of their roster for years moving forward. Whatever. Let's just jump into the results. So on YouTube, 64% of you agreed that the Jakub Vrana trade could be the best trade Doug Armstrong has ever made. Looking in the comments, Cody Fonte said it's a good trade, but the best trade Armstrong has ever made is the trade for O'Reilly. It sent Thompson to Buffalo, which, looking how he turned out, hurts a bit, but it led to a Stanley Cup and O'Reilly winning the Conn Smythe. Blondie Girl replies to that and says, that's also my take. I feel like you can't beat the O'Reilly trade, which is crucial for the Cup run. However, Vrana could end up being top 10 best trades of all time for St. Louis. So not just Doug Armstrong, top 10 of all time. Interesting takes there. You'll have to wait and see whether or not I agree. Jumping into Twitter, however, looking at this, again, very surprised by the results. 55% of Twitter voters agreed that the Jakub Vrana trade could go down as the greatest trade of all time for Doug Armstrong. Obviously, 45% saying no. Cardinals Blues fan says, LOL, short-minded much, and posts a gif of Ryan O'Reilly. And Robert Thomas, the tank engine, says, very good, but never the best. And someone replied and says, no topping Ryan O'Reilly. And look, that's the obvious answer. Maybe Jakub Vrana will go down and score multi-50 goal seasons and lead the Blues to another Stanley Cup, and then you could say, you know what, yeah, that's the best trade Doug Armstrong has ever made. But the St. Louis Blues went out and traded away none of their top 3 prospects at the time, who were Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, and it was Klim Kostin were the big 3, as well as, some draft picks, etc. Vladimir Sobotka, Patrick Berglund, nothing important at the time for Ryan O'Reilly, who went on to lead the Blues to their first ever Stanley Cup in an incredible season in which he won the Conn Smythe, scored 5 goals scored in 5 consecutive games in the Stanley Cup final, which is a feat that hadn't been done since Wayne Gretzky. He also won the Selke Trophy that year. He was absolutely incredible. Any trade you make that pretty much directly results in a Stanley Cup win is going to be hard to top. And the Blues do not win that Stanley Cup without Ryan O'Reilly. So unless Jakub Vrana goes on to lead the Blues to a Stanley Cup and also have a better career than Ryan O'Reilly, it's going to be hard to beat. Now, you look back and you say, okay, but the Blues gave up Tage Thompson for Ryan O'Reilly, and now he's one of the best goal scorers in the league. Whereas all you gave up for Jakub Vrana was a 7th round pick and a guy that will never see NHL time. If that seventh round pick turns into the next Connor McDavid, then you look a little bit silly. But that's the only argument I could say where, like, value wise, it's going to be near impossible to beat that Jakub Vrana trade, because you essentially got him for free. You might as well have traded, brought him off of waivers or signed him in free agency. The fact that it is even considered a trade is silly. So that's the only really argument I think you could. It depends on your outlook of best value. Jakub Vrana. Most impactful trade for winning, Ryan O'Reilly. So I would go with the disagree on that one, but I was surprised to see that a good majority of you on both YouTube and Twitter thought a little bit differently than I did. That being said, we are going to move on to the second question, and that is, who should be the next captain of the St. Louis Blues? But before I get into that question, which spicy results for sure, I want to tell you guys about our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, the tournament is heating up, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up today, claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. I'll be right back with the second half of today's episode and the second blue or false question. All right, so the results of the first poll were a little bit surprising to me, and I bet also for a lot of you guys listening. However, the second one kind of went a little bit more towards what I would expect. Now, this wasn't exactly a blue or false and agree or disagree. This one had multiple options. I cheated a little bit. I'm sorry. I said, quote, who should be the next captain of the St. Louis Blues? And I gave 3 options: Brayden Schenn, Colton Parayko, and Robert Thomas. And then obviously I also added someone else as a 4th option, just the word someone else. And, people replied with who else they thought. Whatever. Looking at YouTube, 50 votes, 56% of you said Brayden Schenn, 8% said Colton Parayko. That's going to be a theme here. And 24% said Robert Thomas. So Brayden Schenn, heavy favorite. Robert Thomas kind of hanging in there, and Colton Parayko getting no love. 12% of you said someone else. Moving into the replies, Chunky Conspicuous, great name, says Schenn is a perfect captain material. He's a goal scorer, a playmaker, a big hitter, and a fighter all in one when he needs to be. And on top of that, he brings a lot of heart to the ice. He really reminds me of David Backes. Blondie Girl says, I am mixed on this between Schenn and Thomas. Schenn would give you that veteran experience to help the young guys. If you want more short term, he would be the better option. Thomas is the future of the St. Louis Blues. However, he is ready to take that step. He would be better. He would be the better option if you go long term. I picked Thomas, but I am more mixed on that. I am Newfie says Sammy Blais. Okay. And Two Pyramid says Marco Scandella. So maybe some sarcasm in the replies. I don't know. That's not for me to judge. On Twitter, the results were pretty similar, except more heavily favored towards Brayden Schenn, with 64% of the 99 votes going to Brayden Schenn, 18% going to Robert Thomas, 11% going to someone else, and only 7% going to Colton Parayko. So I think that's probably about 6 or 7 votes in total for Colton Parayko in that one, and then like 4 in the other one. So out of 150 votes, Colton Parayko got 10. Ooh, that's a tough one. Looking at the replies, Parayko with 0 votes tells you everything you need to know about him. That's obviously before he got a couple. That was Nathan. Zach says Parayko at 0 after 40 plus votes is amazing. Cardinals Blues fan says Booch or Falk. Both solid choices. Jason White says Jake Neighbors. And Alex Seppi says, in all caps, Parayko? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Laughing emoji, laughing emoji, laughing emoji. So, a couple things to break down here. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Blues fans do not like Colton Parayko. I obviously threw him in there to be a little bit divisive. I didn't think he was going to get a lot of votes, but me personally, I am a big fan of his game this season, and I think the hate that he gets is a little bit unjustified. I think Blues fans and just sports fans in general tend to scapegoat players on teams when they're struggling, and it used to be Zach Sanford, and a little bit Jake Allen. Now it's Colton Parayko. I didn't think he was going to get bashed quite as much as he did in this poll, getting a 10 out of 150 votes. That's tough. Also, more replies bashing him than actually contributing to the poll. Look, I would agree. I don't think Colton Parayko would make a great captain. He doesn't seem like he's the most strong spoken leader, and that's okay. Not every player is. But just in terms of the typical captain role, and it kind of plays into the third poll question. You typically, not typically, but a lot of times you see teams just give the captaincy to their best defenseman, and Colton Parayko, for better or worse, has been the Blues' best defenseman this season. And also, has a decent amount of tenure on this team. There's not a lot of guys on the Blues that have been on the team for a long period of time. I think Robert Bortuzzo is the longest tenured St. Louis Blue at this point. So, Parayko being on the team for a while definitely adds to that as well. But he's so divisive, he's so polarizing. The fan base either loves him or hates him, mostly hates him. And he's locked up for a long time. This is the first year of an 8-year extension that he signed. I got that wrong in a previous video. I said that kicked in next year, so apologies for that. It's hard to keep track of all the massive defenseman contracts the Blues have given out. Anyways, yeah, it made sense for those reasons on the surface, but then if you look into it, and obviously the fan base agrees, it's just not the right choice for the St. Louis Blues. Looking at some of the other names mentioned, Pavel Buchnevich, I think is a good option. He's a really good forward. He just hasn't been here that long, and I think, that's sort of a reason why you would hesitate on giving him a C so early. Jake Neighbors, I love the idea. I think he brings a lot of heart to the team. I think he plays with a lot of physicality, similar to what people said about Brayden Schenn in the sense that he sort of brings everything to the team. I think Jake Neighbors would be a good choice in that aspect, but there's too much veteran leadership on this team to give it to someone as young and inexperienced as Jake Neighbors. And that is also sort of my answer for Robert Thomas. As much as I love Robert Thomas, and as much as it would make perfect sense to give the captaincy to who is most likely going to be your number one center for the next decade, pretty much. Might be a little bit too early for that, just given, like I said, there's still a good chunk of veterans on this team, and guys that just potentially deserve it more based on how long they've been in the league, et cetera, et cetera. All of that leading into why I think Brayden Schenn is the perfect pick for next captain. And the YouTube commenter, I forget who it was the one with the funny name, said it perfectly. He scores, he makes, he plays strong enough defense. And he's always the first guy to step up for a fight. He throws hits. He plays with passion, and most importantly, he was a big part of that Stanley Cup winning team. And I think that's a big thing: is you want your captain to have winning experience. And Brayden Schenn is one of the few guys up on the roster that had a significant part of that Stanley Cup winning team. And because of that, I think he is the perfect pick for the next captain of the St. Louis Blues. I think it's a no-brainer. I would be shocked if it were anyone else other than Braden Shen, but then again, you never know. He's under contract for a few years after this as well, so you wouldn't have to worry about a situation that we've seen a few times in the past where you name a guy captain and then they leave within like 3 years. Uh, so unless he were to get traded, which I almost said like I doubt the Blues would trade their captain. I literally almost said that. And then you guys would have been like, "You dummy!" They literally just did. Yeah, they literally just did. So you know what? Maybe who knows what'll happen in the future. But Braden Shen is my pick for the next captain and was overwhelmingly your guys' pick as well. That being said, we have one final blue or false question coming up, and that is about everyone's favorite gigantic defenseman, Colton Parayko. But you're going to have to stay tuned to hear that poll and the results of it when we get back. Don't go anywhere. All right. One final blue or false question. It's about Colton Parayko. The last poll didn't do too kindly to him. Let's see if this one's any different. Spoiler alert, it's not. I said agree or disagree. Colton Parayko can be the number one defenseman on a contending team. Let's dig into the numbers, shall we? On YouTube, 81% of you disagreed that Colton Parayko can be the number one defenseman on a contending team, and only 19% of you agreed. Got a couple replies. Cody Fonte says he has bursts where he looks good. I think he should be more involved in the offense. It would be nice to see him jump up in the rush more, and I would like to see him set up for point shots more often. Some of that is how Ruby wants higher quality shots over quantity, but with some tweaks, I think Parayko could be a number one for sure. I don't disagree, honestly. Blondie Girl says, I am mixed on this one. Colton can be very good when he's got a consistent D-man. Why 2019 went very well for him. Jay Bomeister. However, when he has a very inconsistent D-man, aka ever since then, he has to play more than what is expected. So I said disagree because this D-core is locked up long term. However, if he can prove he's a number one defenseman, absolutely. Now, going over to Twitter, you guys were a little bit nicer to Colton Parayko there, but still not so much. Only 31% of you said that you would agree that Colton Parayko could be the number one defenseman on a contending team, while 69% of you, nice, disagreed. Richard Clay says he could be the main guy on a second pair or a good complement to a top pair left defenseman. Zach says no, but I think he'd be a great partner for a number one D-man on a contender. All right. Colton Parayko, not a popular guy. And I don't want to repeat myself from what I said in the last segment, but I kind of agree with what everybody said. I think he has shown flashes of being a number one defenseman. And I think in 2019, when he was playing alongside Jay Bomeister, Jaybo didn't get quite as much credit for how darn good he was and how darn good Colton Parayko was. I mean, Parayko was phenomenal in that playoff run. He was up there almost just as good as Alex Pietrangelo. I think my favorite statistic was from Game 7. I think it was Game 7. Was that Colton Parayko and Alex Pietrangelo were on the ice for like 59 minutes and 53 seconds of the game. So there was only a 7-second period. This might be wrong. I haven't looked at the stat in a while, but it's something ridiculous like that. If anyone can find that stat, definitely let me know in the comments or on Twitter or whatever. But it was something along the lines of there were only like 7 seconds of game time where one of Colton Parayko and Alex Pietrangelo wasn't on the ice. And that is just absurd to have two defensemen that can play that much ice time. And obviously we saw how that went. It basically was a shutout besides like a fluttery goal at the end for the Boston Bruins. And I think after that, everyone was like, holy crap. Colton Parayko is phenomenal. He is so good. He could totally be, he was the number two defenseman on this team, which he kind of was. And then Pietrangelo left. And it's like, okay, well, second best defenseman, Colton Parayko. Hey, buddy, you're the number one now. And he kind of didn't live up to expectations. Now, part of that was due to his ability. I think he definitely underperformed and has been underperforming consistently since then. He's dealt with a back injury, which is a nightmare for anyone, but especially someone of his size and at his position. It hurts your mobility. And I think we saw that out of him for sure. He's nagging injuries. Definitely didn't seem like he quite had the same mobility and agility that he had before. He's kind of gotten some of that back lately. He still doesn't look like the version of him that we saw in 2019. However, the aspects of his game that were very frustrating, like the turnovers, being out of position, not contributing as much offensively, have kind of cleaned up a little bit lately. I think the offense is still something I would like to see him pick up, but you can look at his defensive partner and the fact that he's spent most of his time playing with Nick Leddy, a guy who is by no means a top pairing defenseman in the NHL anymore, has really hindered Colton Parayko's ability to prove himself. And it's sort of a situation where he's going to sort of like how Jay Bomeister quietly elevated Colton Parayko and made him look that much better. It's the same thing for whoever Colton Parayko's played with, whether it's Nico Mikkola or Nick Leddy, etc. It's just as feasible that having a poor defensive partner can make you look significantly worse than you are. I think that's sort of the case for Colton Parayko. But also the flip side of that is you look at the definition of a number one defenseman, and in my mind, a number one defenseman is a guy that is going to be dominant and great, and a number one defenseman regardless of who they're paired up with. You look at guys like Victor Hedman, Alex Pietrangelo when he was on St. Louis. Obviously, those guys do have solid D partners, but it's less of a tandem operation and more of holy crap, that guy is a really good defenseman and his partner's pretty darn good too. So the only way that I could see Colton Parayko being the number one defenseman on a contender is if his partner is someone who is like Justin Falk quality, sort of a 1A, 1B situation where you, instead of having one really darn good defender and one just, above average defender or pretty good defender, you have two really good defenders. You don't have like a franchise defenseman, but you have two elite level top pairing defensemen. That's the only way I could see Colton Parayko being a true number one defenseman on a contender. But who knows? I think his play over the last few weeks has been really, really strong, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Blues manage to fix this defensive core and get Colton Parayko a consistent D partner. Maybe we'll all be proved wrong. Who knows? That being said, that is all the time I have for you guys today. Look out for an episode this weekend. I think I'm going to get one out for you guys either tomorrow or Sunday. Make sure you're following the show on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. That way you can vote in these polls, leave the replies. I appreciate everyone who voted in the polls, who left the reply. These episodes have been my favorite to make lately. I love the fan interaction. I love, the hot takes and the debates. I love this. So I appreciate everyone who's voting, commenting. I know there's some of you that have commented on pretty much every single one of these, and I remember that. I keep that in mind. I really do appreciate it. So if you want to participate in the one next week, follow the show on Twitter at Lockdown Blues. Subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can vote in the polls. You can leave your replies. You can bash on Colton Parayko. You can bash on me for having stupid opinions. It doesn't matter. I will read them all, as I have. I have not left a single reply to a poll out of one of these. So definitely participate in the future. It means a lot, and I really enjoy it, like I said. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. That way you never miss a new upload. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. Thank you all so much for listening. And as always, let's go Blues.